Welcome to Call to the Bullpen, the podcast for executives and business leaders who want to make the right strategic decisions at the right time. I'm Jason Carvalho. Joining me are my co-hosts,
Clint Overton
and Ted Stann,
the founders of BoardroomBullpen.com. In the past 30 days, the global landscape has been anything but stable. We've seen significant shifts in U.S. tariff policies, with tariffs on Chinese imports soaring and escalating trade tensions causing market volatility. Global stock markets took a hit, with European and Asian markets feeling the pressure. On top of that, the European Union imposed retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, and new diplomatic talks between Japan, China, and South Korea are highlighting the geopolitical turning point we're witnessing. For businesses, this is a reminder that volatility is always on the horizon and leaders must stay agile. With these global shifts, businesses face risks and rising risks faster than ever, whether it be supply chains, trade, or market fluctuations, and need to recalibrate quickly to stay competitive. Today, we'll explore how great operators bring calm, clarity, and momentum during times like this when the market hesitates and uncertainty looms. How do the best leaders distinguish signal from noise and drive their businesses forward? Let's dive in. Clint, when macro signals flash, we've seen changes in geopolitical tensions, tightening of capital flows. How do experienced operators distinguish signal from noise inside a complex organization? You've always emphasized the importance of revisiting your strategy during times of uncertainty. Can you walk us through how you approach this process? What's the first thing you do when assessing whether the fundamentals have shifted, and how do you ensure your leadership team stays aligned, especially when the pressure's on?
Yeah, Jason, I think that it's really important to always kind of sift through the noise. I think that there's obviously, when there's a lot of market turmoil or perceived turmoil, there's a lot of things happening in the news, including social media, the evening newscast, what you're reading kind of in the paper or online or the old school way. I mean, ultimately, running any type of good business is always thinking about the long run and not getting too overstimulated by the short run. Obviously, there's some businesses that require much quicker responses, but for most businesses and enterprise businesses in our country, sticking to the fundamentals is what really matters. And so I think separating the noise from the facts is kind of first and foremost. There's a lot of energy that good organizations put into building a vision, a strategy, the KPIs and goals, which we've talked about in prior episodes. And those are the things that have to continue to be kind of your due north. And ultimately, any deterioration in those numbers is really what's going to tell you if what's happening in the market is actually affecting what your strategy is, in the short term and long term. And the utilization of those capabilities and that information is really what should be kind of your guiding post for any decisions that you make in your organization.
And I would say, Clint, I think it's incredibly important for businesses to make a determination looking at their KPIs, looking at their operations, and making the determination, is this a long-term effect that we're going to see in our business? Or, as Jason pointed out, is this really a flash? And so, we had seen long-term effects of supply chain during COVID, and obviously there was a great rebound from that. Ultimately, it's a look at, is this short-term noise that we're seeing? Is this a flash, or is this ultimately going to dictate the economy going forward?
And I think just to add to that as well, it's just the separation of the knowns and the unknowns. And I'm just really said very simply. And what you're hearing versus what is actually happening, I think we all recognize there can be a divide between the two of those things. And sometimes it can be more significant than a lot of folks really will even talk about. And I think to really keep things simple, a lot of organizations, I think, make things really complicated when things get hairy. And the reality is most businesses that have strong fundamentals in the long run have kind of their master plan and measurements put in place. And if they keep it simple, they can ride the waves a lot more effectively. I think it's the businesses that stray away from the fundamentals, overreact, and make emotional decisions are the ones that typically end up getting off path and ultimately can be sunk pretty quickly in a short-term changing market because they've overreacted to what they perceive as happening.
Ted, from the finance chair, what indicators tell you the business model needs rethinking?
Yeah, well, what I would say is, cash is always king. It's something that I talked about while teaching at WashU to my students. The number one indicator for any company out there is cash flow. One of the things that I historically have told companies is make sure that you have a line of credit so that you can weather the storm, assuming that we're upon a storm right now. The other thing that I'd say is, if you were to talk to your sales leader, if you were to talk to your marketing leader, they need to have a great handle right now on what leads are being generated on the marketing side. Ultimately, what does the sales pipeline look like right now? Is it stagnant? Is it growing? Are deals falling out of the pipeline? And is that actually because of what's going on currently with the geopolitical environment? And so what I would say is if it's just stalling right now, if it's due to the uncertainty, if you're still seeing that pipeline generation, if you're still seeing that lead generation, that's a pretty good indication that you're going to continue to have a strong business once this breaks free. And so if you look at your strategic view from a sales and marketing standpoint, that should be a pretty good indicator. Again, outside of looking at the cash flow, that should be a pretty good indicator of how strong your business is and how strong it will be going forward. And so, that is one of the keys right now. And I think it's a key in almost every uncertain time out there. Are you actually continuing to develop business, or is it drying up? Or ultimately, are you looking at longer sales cycles? You have to modify your business plan, your financial forecast, if that's the case.
I think the other thing too, what we appear to be seeing right now as well, and some of this is kind of anybody's guess, but I think ultimately there are some measures that are being put in place, I think, quite frankly, to assess how the market might respond to it. And so really, I think, again, looking at short run versus long run is we have to separate the knowns versus the unknowns. And part of that is even some of these decisions or communications that are coming out from the White House and even in some of our contemporaries in other geographies is we do need to take a little bit of a wait and see, in addition to continuing to monitoring the data that we're utilizing to inform our decisions every day. One thing that I have just from personal experience through the years, and I know we kind of keep coming back to this, and we talked about this in our first couple of episodes as well, is that if you really have clarity in terms of your business goals and the KPIs that help you understand if you're staying on track or not, those things are always the truth. And if you think about it, even if there's not things that are known and being communicated in media, if you have really great KPIs, those are the things that allow you to understand, am I doing well? Am I doing kind of as expected? Or is there an alarm bell? If the alarm bells aren't going off, despite the fact that everyone's running around like a chicken with their head cut off right now because they're scared of what might happen, stay true to what the data is telling you. And if you're monitoring on a routine basis, you're understanding what's influencing those numbers, you're talking to the people in the market that you trust that have really good insights in terms of your industry or industries and what's happening and what people are talking about, you can always stay in front of it. And really, it's really about not making the crazy knee-jerk reactions or trying to put guesswork into what might happen. Trust the data, trust your experience, let that be the guiding force in terms of how you're making decisions. And ultimately, you're going to be in a much better position to have success.
The first three moves of a composed leader. I'm going to pitch out a scenario here. A $50 million family-owned business is wobbling. Demand is inconsistent. Margins are compressed. Board is tense. What are the first three strategic moves you advise before they start taking pivots? I'll throw this one to Ted.
I guess if I were to look at the first three, again, it's going to fall back to a little bit on the cash flow side, because when you talk about compressed margins, ultimately that has a huge impact on your cash flow. What's compressing those margins? Ultimately, if you look at it from the standpoint of the CEO of the company, he should have a very good handle on what is compressing that. Ultimately, again, back to an earlier point that we made on the short run, long run, is that going to be affected just in the short run? If so, it can be overcome. Not to say that it can't be overcome in the long run. I think if you're looking at the long run and that compression is going to continue to happen, obviously you're going to need to look at internal decisions on, how can we improve that margin? Ultimately, likely not going to happen if it's long run factors on the inputs that are going into those cost of goods sold. But you begin to look at becoming more efficient. So, I'd say that's the area that I would look at if you're seeing compression on the margin from a margin standpoint, and ultimately with the effect on your bottom line, you need to take a broader view of it, a longer term view of it.
One other thing that I would add that's really important, because I think during times of uncertainty, eyes wide open leaders, it gives them the opportunity to kind of reassess how they built the business and the foundations that they built the business on. And so one of the things that can happen, especially when you see the turbulence that we're seeing right now, and it could be tariffs, but it could be supply chain, it could be a lot of different things, is really what's your concentration risk in your business. And if you have significant concentration risk, which could be suppliers, partners, or customers, then in dramatic swings in the economy, and there could be a lot of different things that can influence it right now, tariffs is one of the hot topics around it, those things can be significantly exposed. And so on one hand, when I communicate the importance of not overreacting, I do think that in some cases, in the short run, when you're dealing with a lot of pressure, it may identify a potential fundamental weakness that you have in your organization around how you should have been running it in prior years, and may require you to start putting some energy around pivoting your strategy in a way that ultimately you're not going to fix any of that in the next 90 to 120 or 180 days, but you can right the ship in the longer run and create more sustainable and more easy to expect returns by reducing that concentration risk. And so I do think that is one of the things that some companies may be recognizing right now, if they really look in the mirror, is some of the decisions that they made around concentration risk because it was the easy button decision for them at the time. They've been able to ride the wave of success over the last number of years, depending on the market that they were in. And now concentration risk could be something that at least requires some effort and energy in the short term, because ultimately it would influence how you'd want to run your business, not just in the short run, but also in the long run as well.
The other point I would make, Clint, is obviously we went through COVID, and that wasn't too terribly long ago, and I think there were lessons learned during COVID, and I think some of those lessons can translate into what we're seeing. Obviously, the hope is that we're not looking at a long downturn. Some businesses obviously excelled during COVID, especially in the tech sector. For those that had supply chain issues, I do think that there is a translation given what happened during COVID and what we're seeing with the uncertainty in the market at this point in time. So I'd just add that to it as well.
And I think the other, we could assume that concentration risk is a component of this in terms of how you'd evaluate your business strategy. I think the other thing is just understanding as a business owner is, do you have a natural hedge in your business? And so what is the most likely volatile kind of counter to what you've experienced during good times? What's the counter to that? And do you have some type of investment in terms of how you operate with a natural hedge that can insulate you more during a market pivot? And so I think that's one of the other things too, that as organizations are going through assessment this year, and I think ultimately a lot of businesses during and post-COVID had to think about creating natural hedges in their business. And so I think this is another area that businesses can evaluate, because ultimately that is part of just doing good business.
I guess said another way is companies prior to COVID that had counter-cyclical products or services that they offered, they fared better than those that did not. And so I would guess that there are quite a few businesses out there that looked at counter-cyclical products that would continue to stabilize the company as we go through these rough periods, these rough economic times.
Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. A famous quote by Warren Buffett that relates to times of uncertainty or market downturns. Some of the strongest companies emerge from downturns. So a question here posed, there is opportunity. Number one, what separates those who lead through adversity versus those who stall out? I think we've talked a little bit about that, but I think it'd be great to maybe double click on potential opportunities down the road. Ted, for you, M&A opportunity in down cycles, and Clint, you come from a storied professional background with Citibank, and you've seen large org shifts. So love to dive deeper into those two areas. And maybe I'll start with Ted here on capital discipline and potential M&A opportunities down the road.
Sure. What I'd say is, as we came out of COVID 2022, you would see a lot of industrial light manufacturing companies that some were incredibly successful as we came out of COVID. Ultimately, there were others that didn't fare nearly as well. And if you were to look at the peaks and valleys, obviously buyers are looking at those valleys as opportunistic times to purchase companies. From a seller standpoint, ultimately, you want to be at the top of your game. And so, there has been quite a lot of M&A activity out there. What I would say is, from a business ownership standpoint, you've built a business, there are going to be cycles, ultimately wait it out. And that's one of the reasons why, from a capital construction standpoint, it's so important to have the ability to loan. Hopefully you've got a great relationship with your bank. You have that line of credit. It's going to help you through. But the time to sell is not at the valley, which I think everyone knows. Ultimately, it is when you're at the top of your game. And there were unfortunately businesses out there that had to sell at the bottom just to keep the doors open, keep their employees employed, which I greatly respect the CEOs that were able to do that. So yeah, what I'd say is there has been a lot of M&A activity. There's been a lot of investment activity. But what I would say is that it's been depressed from a seller's standpoint when it comes to valuation. And I certainly would like to see a lot of those companies rebound and then ultimately maximize their value.
I think the other side of this, Jason, that you kind of teed up at the beginning of this is kind of the leadership quandary that happens during this, and what good leadership looks like and what less than good leadership looks like. And so I've written about this a lot here recently, just because I've had those experiences and I've seen what it looks like when it's not done very well. And ultimately, the mettle and character of a leader is, how do they respond when things aren't easy? Anybody can lead when things are simple, straight line, where they've got tailwinds to make everything easy. It's those that can respond in the heat of the battle are the ones that really separate themselves from the rest. And so you made the Warren Buffett reference earlier, which I actually did it in a post here on LinkedIn recently too, just comparing the fact that some of the greatest opportunities that you have in your business are ultimately during the times where there's the most level of uncertainty. And it doesn't have to be acquisition. That happens to be where Warren plays. I mean, he makes investments during times of uncertainty and he finds bargain values, and he's not afraid to make those investments, and which is why he's had so much significant success. But ultimately, as a leader, it's really about, one, not sticking your head in the sand and hoping for the best. That is not a strategy that will ever play well. Not only is it not good for your business, it's not good for your people. And one of the things that leaders who don't necessarily have their eyes wide open about is they don't recognize how much their actions are observed by their teams. And they oftentimes do not give them credit for the intelligence of everybody in the organization, no matter how much or how little they make in terms of income. If you're leading the team, eyes are on you all the time. And so your ability to stay in constant communication with the team, understanding what may be creating anxiousness for them, putting them at ease that you have a steady hand on the wheel is really, really important. And it's not just about saying it, it's about the actions that you're taking as well. And so being actively engaged in the decision-making process, and ultimately the businesses that are focused and intentional during times of uncertainty have the opportunity to be big market movers. And it doesn't have to be a activity. Like, I mean, we can pivot to that like that. Those are the big bang options, but it can be really as simple as sticking with your fundamentals and recognizing what's really happening and staying in communication with your suppliers and your channel partners and making key decisions that allow you to navigate the waters. Like, it doesn't have to be significant, but you have to be the steady captain at the wheel. And if you're not only is the business not going to have success in the short term, and potentially you're going to fall behind your competitors but you're also putting at risk the way that your team and your employees look at you. And that could be something that you may never be able to.
I think the other thing I'd bring up is, it's important to have other CEOs that you talk to. I mean, there are CEOs that have been in the seat for 25 years and they would have been through the dot-com crash and the financial crisis and COVID. And there's always learnings when going through what I'd call shaky markets. And so, to lean on other CEOs as well that have been through it, that have seen the effects of ultimately 3 market changing events, and recognizing that, does this have the possibility to be that? Absolutely it does. I think the hope is for everyone out there that, this is short term, as opposed to long term, but leaning on others with the experience, having been through it. And it doesn't even have to be CEOs. It can be other leaders and inside of organizations, that in and of itself is incredibly powerful as well.
As we wrap up today's episode, remember that uncertainty isn't something to shy away from. It's proving ground. The best leaders don't retreat when volatility enters the system. They recalibrate, they lean into the fundamentals, and they lead fearlessly. Great businesses emerge stronger during uncertain times because they stay aligned, agile, and focused. To our listeners, whether you're a CEO, investor, or business leader, this is your moment to act. Keep a pulse on your team, your advisors, and the market. Sift through the noise and move forward with confidence. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. We'll be back soon with more insights on leadership strategy, navigating the challenges of today's fast-paced business world. Until next time, I'm Jason Carvalho.
Clint Overton.
And I'm Ted Stann.
Lead with clarity, keep making those strategic calls, and remember, growth happens when others hesitate. We'll see you next time.